Welcome, everybody, to the Gilder Spotlight podcast. I have a super exciting guest today. His name's Chase Brignac. He has a very eclectic background, starting from NASA to companies like Target and Apple, and now he's an entrepreneur himself, um, founding a company called ChatOpenSource. But Chase, I would love for you to give a background of yourself to our audience.
Hey, Mom. Yeah, I guess I'll give my background. Uh, I grew up in South Louisiana, not exactly your typical like Silicon Valley founder background. I went to LSU, like state school. Um, I kind of grew up in a place where like no one leaves your town. In fact, I grew up like basically like right next to Brignac Road. Um, Brignac Road is like Brignac's my last name, and for generations and generations, our family just like kind of stayed put, right? So it was kind of unbelievable. I remember from like a young kid telling my mom like from the age of 10 that I was going to live in San Francisco. And I told her one morning, and she just thought that was completely unbelievable. Just had no faith that I would get out of Louisiana. I was like, haha, you're going to be here in Louisiana because that's what everyone else does, right? And I mean, my role models growing up were my grandparents, my grandfather, he's a Southern Baptist preacher. He took me in from a young age. I left home when I was 15 and lived with him and my grandmother. And they, kind of took care of me while I was like in high school and getting ready for college. And then I went to LSU and I got a physics and math degree. I was kind of always determined to get out of Louisiana. I grew up in, South Louisiana off the Mississippi River. There's this place called Cancer Alley. If you like Google Cancer Alley, we have a Wikipedia page.
Right.
It's like a Wikipedia page describing, like all the pollution in the area. There's a lot of chemical plants there. My dad worked for Shell Chemical, and has like health problems and stuff. And a lot of our family growing up had a lot of health problems. A lot of friends, developed health problems because of that. And
Wow.
yeah, so I went to LSU to try to escape.
Just to
Got my degree there, and then
Right.
yeah,
Just to quickly take a step back, Chase, when you had that kind of epiphany when you're younger, and you're like, I want to get out of here. I want to go
yeah,
to San Francisco. Why San Francisco?
yeah. Oh wow. I mean, it's funny. My parents got me a computer in my bedroom. It was like their old computer, so they got a new one, and their their old computer was given to me, and I got access to the internet. And I remember just like for the first time ever, kind of having the opportunity to talk to people that were outside of my own South Louisiana culture. And I remember just like really vibing with people that I talked to from the Bay Area. I remember, it being a very feeling of like hope and prosperity and the startup founder dream and kind of uh, just very different than what I was used to. So I
Because
used to
I'm
love Bill
assuming
Nye
kind
the
of
Science
growing up
Guy.
in right. I'm assuming growing
Yeah,
up in Cancer Alley, Louisiana, you mentioned that your family, was South Baptist, kind of more. It sounds like because when you look at the Bay Area itself, it's probably the liberal capital of the world. When you look at Louisiana, it's
yeah,
probably fairly opposite. Did you kind of
yeah.
want to, and I know that you're vibing with people online, but did you want to kind of just understand? And also, was this around the time that the tech boom was happening in San Francisco as well?
Well, yeah, I guess I was about 10 years old, so this was 2001 when I decided what I wanted to do. And so Google was getting big and all these, big companies were
Right.
were being built at the time, and I remember just being like, wow, this is very different. I remember growing up, I grew up very religious and just kind of challenged those assumptions, from my religious upbringing, and just kind of saw through, it's like you see through Santa Claus as a kid, you
Right.
see like, oh, my parents lied to me. Like, that's not necessarily true, right? And you think like, okay, well, Santa Claus isn't real. What else is real? I kind of had that same epiphany with, with my religious upbringing. And so, just wanted the opposite of that. Wanted something based on science and evidence and prosperity and, new ways of thinking and new technology. And
Is that
yeah,
why you
that was
majored
always
in
me. I was
physics?
always, yeah, yeah, I got a physics and math degree. For a hot second, I thought I was going to be a physicist in high school. I took these computer science classes in high school to learn C++ and Java because it was kind of a backup. I was like, well, I could be a startup founder if I don't end up wanting to be a physicist. And then it turns out that was actually that was very, very, cogent thinking. I was very thoughtful at the time for a high school student, and I remember, you know, later on in college being like, "Oh my gosh, thank God I took these computer science classes." So I went. I got my physics and math degree from LSU, and then I went up to grad school. I was gonna work on quantum computers. The guy that I worked with at LSU, he invented Wright's law, which is like the main scaling law. Uh, but for he invented that for quantum computers. He was essentially able to piece together that like, hey, Wright's law also applies to quantum computers, right? It applies to silicon chips, right? And that reduces the price of TVs if you produce more TVs, the price of cars if you produce more cars, the price of transistors if you produce more transistors. But this law also applies to quantum computers and to qubits. If you can manufacture more quantum computers and more qubits, each additional unit becomes exponentially cheaper, right? For every doubling, there's like a constant percentage decrease in the per unit cost. So he invented that law. I was working in his lab, and I remember thinking like, in college, like, shit, this also applies to AI, you know, just as much. ImageNet and AlexNet were what, like around 2012. So I was in college at the time, and I remember thinking like, holy shit, this is really going to take off fairly soon. And so I went
How,
to go get a PhD in quantum computing, but I dropped out and worked for NASA instead.
okay. So there's a lot of things that I want to unpack there, but actually, just
Sure.
how did you? So why did you, or how did NASA come in, come to the picture?
Yeah.
And when you're getting your PhD, I'm assuming you're working with this amazing guy that basically created that law that can be applicable to AI. The question that I have is, how is that law applicable to AI? Just curious. I mean, because it sounds like it's like a hardware thing, but it's like
Yeah.
if you mass produce something on a way more inexpensive way, like just if you can explain that a little bit better for my mind to kind of grasp it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I could dig into both of those. I mean, first on, the first question about how NASA came into view. I toured a lab. I was touring this lab, and there was a neighbor of mine who already worked at NASA. And when I toured this lab, they were looking for like PhD students to go work in the lab. And I remember going to NASA Goddard Space Flight Center to their main campus and looking at this lab and thinking, yeah, this is pretty cool. I could work here as a PhD student eventually. But my friend, my neighbor, Ryan Wilkinson, he was like, "Don't leave campus, Chase. Just don't do it. Like, stay here, have lunch. I promise I'll pick you up after lunch. I'm going to show you my lab instead." So I stayed. He brought me around the lab, and then this coworker, Chris Johnson, happened to be in the lab, and while my friend is giving me a tour, he's like showing me around like, this is the mass spectrometer, the Earth, version of the mass spectrometer that is on Maven, which is like a Mars mission that's like, orbiting Mars right now. This is the Earth version of it. Here's the Earth version of the mass spectrometer on Curiosity, like the robot on Mars. Just showing me around, and Chris Johnson walks in the lab and he goes, "Oh, you're Ryan's friend," and just starts grilling me, just asking me like, "What do you know what this is? Have you ever heard of a mass spectrometer before? Have you ever operated one? Have you ever done this? Do you know what this is? What does this thing do? What do you think this is?" And I'm just like, I thought this was part of the tour or something, right? Like I literally thought that he was just kind of showing me around the lab equipment. And he does this for like, he grills me for, it must have been 15, 20 minutes, showing me around the lab. He kind of takes charge of the tour. And then at the end, he's like, you really should consider working here. And I was like, you mean as a PhD student? He was like, no, as an engineer. I was like, what? He's like, yeah, I just interviewed you. I was like, what?
That's so
Are you kidding me? I
serendipitous.
just
That's
interviewed
amazing.
for a job at NASA. Yeah, he's just like, grilling me, liked my answers. And he's like, yeah, we
Yeah.
need someone to calibrate this mass spectrometer. You know what that is? It's a quadruple pole mass spectrometer, and you have some experience, so like you could do this. Like this is I was like, wow, do I need to get my PhD? He's like, no, don't get your PhD, drop out.
And
Come work for
this was
us.
about back in
I did.
2012. They were that's amazing. Um
2013. Yeah, 2013.
2013 cuz that's like
So,
wow.
yeah, it was so
Yeah, you'd
informal. It
seem
was
that
crazy.
working at NASA would be like way more. They'd have like triple background check, 10 different interviews, all this, but that's
Oh,
like
all that came
one of
later.
the okay, got it. But you pretty much in the back of your
Yeah.
mind you knew that what's that guy, his name was Steve, that was kind of interviewing you and hammering you.
Chris
You kind of knew in
Johnson.
the back of
Chris
your mind that,
Johnson was the
or Chris
guy.
Johnson. Sorry. Sorry, Chris Johnson, excuse
Yeah.
me.
Shout out to Chris.
Uh
Thanks,
so
Chris. You changed my life.
who's Chris Johnson? Was he kind
He
of
was
a
just the
key
coworker
person
of
at
my
NASA?
neighbor, and my neighbor
Wow.
was the one who was like, "You should stay on campus. I'll give you a tour of the lab."
Hmm. Right, right. Wow.
But yeah,
So
before I knew it.
very cool. You're at NASA.
But yeah, I spent 3 years there. I was there for 3 years. I worked on um, Maven, Curiosity, some um, Landsat 8, like a couple other minor missions, but those are the main ones.
When,
And
when you were
yeah, it
younger,
was
were
wild.
you interested in space and in rocket science? Because those are literally the
Oh,
rocket
for
science
sure.
is probably one of the hardest things you can get into. But
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's tied for, quantum physicist. But no, I
right.
loved space growing up. I mean, I used to play with Legos all the time, and build these like spaceships and rocket ships and planes and cities, and it was so much fun. I always had an interest, but yeah, I mean, I got the physics and math degree and kind of had the background necessary to be a systems engineer, and that they hired me as a test engineer. I started out as a test engineer, then I got promoted to a systems engineer, and then I did spacecraft operations after that. So I learned how to operate Landsat 8, and got certified by NASA to operate that satellite. And so I worked on that mission for a while, and then after that, I went to Northrop Grumman. I worked on MQ-4C Triton. It's like a Navy spy plane used by various agencies, and then I worked on radios for Five Eyes. Five Eyes is like this consortium of spy organizations, including the U.S., of course. And so we made radios for spies and for special forces, I think for the U.S. Marines as well. And so, yeah. And then I went up to,
Just
finally made my way up to the Bay Area after that.
got it. Well, just taking a step back to NASA and Northrop, what was an
Yeah.
average day like at NASA working at a place like that? Did you kind of put
Yeah.
on, was it like in the movies going into like some cool secret facility that you had to like, have like your biometric fingerprint and like a stamp or like a key card, all this? Or what was like an average day like at NASA and at Northrop?
I mean, kind of, but yeah, it was also kind of slow and bureaucratic at the same time. I hate saying that. I hate to rag on NASA. NASA's a great organization. I'm glad that they gave me the start that they did to my career, but I don't know. Like, there's so much bureaucracy that there's not a lot of innovation. You know what I mean? It's like
Mm-hmm.
fail fast is not an option, right? You know, like iterate quickly is not an option, right? It's like very different mentality, kind of opposite mentality to the startup industry, where you know
Is
you're you're on a mission and it cannot fail, right? And you're trying to figure
mhm.
out like all the different ways it can fail. You're mitigating all those things, and there's all kinds of checks and bureaucratic processes that you have to go through in order to. Same at Northrop, really. I mean, a lot of that had to do with like the
Mhm.
security clearance and all that stuff. But I mean, an average day looked like showing up on campus, badging in. You go up to the security guard, show them your badge, prove you or maybe scan your badge. They'd, green light and they'd let you in and you would go to the Mission Operations Center, the MOC is what we called it. And that was where we operated the spacecraft. And it's just a giant room. It's got all these people in it, all these desks in it, all these monitors, just, monitoring the different aspects of the spacecraft that are and you walk down the hall, you see like you know spacecraft after spacecraft, you see their operation centers as well. And so you're just it's people in front of screens with all kinds of data on it and all kinds of tracking and all kinds of whatever, and then a bunch of empty seats too. There's also a bunch of empty seats
Right.
everywhere. And then at Northrop, it was kind of the same thing, except instead of a mission operations center, you would like go into the site. You had to be very careful. You couldn't take your cell phone in. If you're
Wow.
going to like into like a skiff or whatever, if you're going into you go into this building with these blacked out windows.
What's a
It's kind of
what's a
surreal.
skiff?
Skiff. It's like, have you ever like in the movies when they take the president to like go to a place and he's like receiving top secret information and stuff like that, and they have like
Yeah,
these
yeah.
secure phones and secure ways of communication, and like no one can take their cell phones in or take any pictures,
Right, right.
or it's only certain personnel that are allowed in. It's a secure way of working on classified information. So I go in there each day and see parts of the spacecraft and or parts of the spy plane, and you just do your work kind of.
Hmm.
I did a lot of systems engineering and then DevOps, a lot of operations work. Yeah, I mean a lot of automation work, that sort of
Hmm.
thing. And that kind of
And
got me my
and so
start, got me the experience I needed.
got it. And so now after you said after Northrop, you finally made it to the Bay Area. What was that first
Yeah.
opportunity when you made it to the Bay Area?
Oh man, it was like a dream come true. It's funny where I come from, like nobody does that, right?
Hmm.
So it always felt possible, but extremely difficult. And then, you get that first job, you really want to impress. So I was, they, they hired me at Deliv, and I was doing infrastructure, security, DevOps, engineering support for the whole startup. And yeah, I mean, I was there to basically work on this same day, next day delivery program is what we had at Deliv. And then Deliv, during the start of the pandemic, got acquired by Target for
Wow.
obvious reasons to start their delivery program. So we built Target's same day, next day delivery program. We went from like 0 to 1 million deliveries per day in like 2 years, and that was wild. That was, I mean, you get hired onto Target, you get acquired by Target, and they put you through the training, but like every you like you're the special case. They're like, oh yeah, everyone needs to
Hmm.
go into the office in Minneapolis, but not you. You stay put. You guys are in San
Yeah.
Francisco. That's fine. We don't want you going anywhere. Just you do what you want.
Wow.
Oh yeah, this training, this is for the employees, but not for you.
Yeah.
You're gonna do this other special training. So that kind
It
of
sounds
felt,
nice
I
though.
don't
It
know.
sounds
It
like they
felt
treat yeah.
Yeah, they
They're
treated me
treating you
well,
guys
you know.
different, you know?
It was
Yeah.
nice. I love Target. Target is sick, dude. Target was great.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And then of course after that, got into Y Combinator. Uh, that was intense. Oh man, that was crazy. It was my
Hmm.
first time founding a company, like really, really founding a company. Like I kind of,
Hmm.
I don't know, dabbled and worked part time as like a
Hmm.
founder in the past, and worked for like, you
Before,
know, with these startup accelerators. Yeah.
mhm. Just a question too that came to
Sorry.
mind when you're explaining kind of when you first came to the Bay Area and you're mentioning that
Yeah.
from where you're from, like it's really uncommon. Just curious, how
Yeah.
did your family react when you joined NASA? 'Cause I'm assuming that's something that's really uncommon from where you come from,
Oh
in
God.
your background. So just
Yeah.
what was their reaction like?
I mean, I basically what I did was like I was so excited that I got everyone like on a call, like a group call at the same time. I was like, guys, I got to tell you something. You're not gonna believe it. Like, you got to get on this. And I had like 8 or 9 of my family members. You're all on this call, and they're like, "What is it? What is it?" And I'm like, "Guys, I got the job at NASA. I'll be
Wow.
working there as an engineer, as a contractor for for I think it was Honeywell. Yeah, it was Honeywell.
Wow.
Um, and so yeah, they were like, "What?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna show up on the NASA base every day and do NASA stuff and get paid to do it." They just couldn't believe it. I cried. I cried in the call, and I they were just so like shocked and proud. And I mean, yeah, it was so outside of the realm, I think, of possibilities for like, there's just not many people like that I know of from where I grew up that went and did that. So yeah, it was shocking to them.
Yeah, and I'm when you're explaining that, I'm literally getting goosebumps just because it is something that it's like it's literally it's incredible from the background that you came from. I mean, just it's incredible if
Thank,
anyone works at NASA, but especially considering your background, it's yeah, it's amazing. Um,
thank
yeah,
you.
that must be one of the best feelings ever. But yeah, just to go back
Oh
on
God,
to
yeah.
San Francisco, you're working at Target, enjoying that life.
Mhm.
What made you get into entrepreneurship?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I guess where do I begin? I think I got to go back to Paul Graham and Sam Altman and Elon Musk. I think those were kind of, you know, in a way, my heroes growing up. Just seeing the way that you can take the world and make something new, right? And make this thing that millions of people use, right? It's like millions of Teslas being made per year. And that's something that just, without that founder, it wouldn't exist. Or, you know, if it did exist, it would be very different, right? Or SpaceX, just a truly unique company. Like, if it wasn't for Elon Musk starting SpaceX, I don't think there would be a space industry in the same way. This is, and I say that coming from NASA, it was kind of one of my frustrations was like, move slow and don't break things. It's kind of the mentality, right? But at SpaceX, the opposite mentality exists. It's the founder's mentality, the innovation, the imagination to start something new. I mean, the gall to think that you're going to vertically land a rocket, after it goes to space. Who does that? That's insane. Like, back before Elon did his thing, like no one did that. And I think seeing that really inspired me. I think, Paul Graham really inspired me. I really look up to, Sam Altman. Um, and, that's, I think that's what it really is all about. I mean, you can have all the money in the world, but if you see a need in society and you fulfill that need and you make something new, that's like something that gives me goosebumps. That's what it's all about, really. It's not about the money or anything like that. I mean, yeah, you want to pay your bills. Of course, everyone wants to pay their bills, but like, what do you care about beyond that, right?
Wow. I think I love that, and I think that's yeah, that's super inspiring. And I yeah, there definitely needs to be more folks like you that wants to, you know, be visionaries to create the cutting edge thing. So I love that. And curious too, because being from Louisiana, I'm assuming that maybe a lot of your peers looked up to like I don't know, football players or athletes. Why did you decide to look up to folks like Sam Altman, Elon Musk, tech entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
kind of these breaking edge people like that?
God, yeah. You know, it's funny. Um, I literally I literally tutored some of the NFL football players that are like some of the most famous NFL football. And the reason why I tutored them was because I didn't give a shit. I would like explicitly show up and it'd be like this famous person, you know, and
Yeah.
everyone was like, "Oh my God, you're blah blah blah." And I'd come up, I'd be like, I don't know who you are, don't really care. Like, let's learn physics together. Like, here, let's go over your homework, right? They're like texting on their phone and not paying
Oh
attention and, you know, thinking about the next football game or whatever. And like, it worked out great for them. But I didn't really look up to them as heroes, even when I was like in front of them, you know. I
hmm
think mean, I still think of myself as I don't know, like looking up to people that I think are actually going to change the world in a really positive way. I mean, you know, like you can you can play football and that's great, you know, like nothing, I'm not ragging on football players, but like, you know, compare that with like vertically landing a rocket or starting a robot factory. You know, like I don't
Right.
I don't think it compares, you know, and so I think that was
Yeah.
you know, if you can change society in a deep way that's really lasting, that's what I really care about.
Yeah. Amazing. And I think yeah, in 100 years or maybe 200 years, maybe one football player out of every I don't know, million would be remembered. But what Elon
Yeah,
Musk is doing, what Sam Altman's doing, I mean, those are going to be, you know, our history has changed forever. So,
yeah,
so
for
going
sure.
back, uh, you were
Hopefully for the better.
you decided. Sorry, what?
Hopefully for the better.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. I think so. Um, you so going back, you found your passion in entrepreneur. Actually, how old were you when you found your passion in entrepreneurship? Like when did at what age? And did you do anything entrepreneurial when you're growing up?
um, growing up, no. I think I originally wanted to be a physicist.
Okay.
Um, I wanted to be a physicist who lived in San Francisco in the beginning. But
Okay.
then I think I secretly wanted to be kind of a founder in the back of my mind, but it was really tough for me to like think that it was possible, you know? Like it wasn't even something that I thought was possible. And I took those computer science classes in high school. Even then, I was like, well, I could always try to do like software engineering or some sort of founder thing. And, you know, there's no way I'll make it, right? I just
Mm-hmm.
remember like having this total as a kid like lack of confidence because I just had no role models, right? I knew zero software engineers, right? I knew zero founders. I knew, you know, zero people that left Louisiana growing up. And so it was just so far removed from my mind, you know, and that only really started to change when I was in college and I started going on to trips for internships. Like interned at the National Institute of Standards and Technology up in Maryland, and that was kind of when I started to encounter people that you know left their states.
Wow. Um, and so going back to San Francisco, you're in a good corporate environment, complacent, making good money. I'm assuming. When did that shift happen? And I know that you had that passion for entrepreneurship to make the world a better place and to create something new. But was it just like, all right, like Target's amazing, but I want to apply to Y Combinator, see how that goes, or did you have like a strategic plan? or did you kind of just
Well,
go for it?
I had a strategic plan at the time. I had a co-founder, a different co-founder than the one that I have now. My previous co-founder and I, we had like a co-founder split, super common in YC, but we had a plan. We essentially were um, working on a kind of like a stable diffusion competitor almost using open source models. And Stable Diffusion came out like weeks after we released. We had like, I don't know, a few thousand users, if that, like very small and cute and quaint. And then Stable Diffusion had like millions of users just 2 weeks later. We were like, oh man, wow. But I mean, they had the distribution advantage, and that was a very hard earned lesson for me. Was distribution is extremely important. You know, so
Right.
yeah, I mean, when I applied to YC with my previous co-founder, uh, that was kind of the plan. Was we were going to generate images for people, and we were at early stages, so we would start with logos, and then we would move to images, and then we would move to movies, and then we would gifs, and then movies and TV shows and things like that, and we would kind of take over the media industry. And it was kind of naive, I would say. We were first time founders. YC saw that. They were very understanding, very gracious about that, and believed in us anyway, right? And
How just because
yeah, I
another
mean,
quick thing, I know YC has an acceptance rate of like I think seven startups get accepted of like 1,000 applications. I don't know, but it's like harder to get
yeah.
into than the hardest university in the world, which is probably like Stanford or Harvard.
Hmm.
Why do you think what made you stand out from the rest being first time founders?
Right, right. Huh. You know, that's an interesting question. I think um, I think it was the backgrounds and the passion. And during the interview, we pushed back, but in a way that I think was thoughtful. Like, we didn't say, like, we weren't dismissive of any of their concerns. In fact, we were like, how can we work with you to address these concerns, right?
Mhm.
Can we reach out after and ask you questions about it? Oh no, we don't have to make any foundation models. We can just fine tune models. That's different, right? This is how they're different. We'd love to chat with you more and talk to you about that. We don't need a billion, millions of dollars to make foundation models like a lot of these, like OpenAI. We can just take an open source model as they improve, and we can fine tune it, and we can, which back then that was it's like a year and a half ago, I guess. At this point, that was like crazy. The world is changing so rapidly. I think people forget that, like, what is very common today a year and a half ago was very uncommon, right? And so I think
Right.
that stood out. The passion stood out. The background stood out. Both of our backgrounds stood out to them, and I think that I mean, they really do bet on people, not necessarily ideas. They know that you're going to pivot. They know that a lot of
Hmm.
times you're not necessarily going to find product market fit, and then it's going to be up to you as a founder to, talk to customers, make something people want, figure out sales, figure out distribution, figure out product, right? Figure all that stuff out. And so, I think, yeah, I think that's the best answer I can come up with. I don't know. You'd have to ask them.
Right. No, definitely. And then when did you make the pivot to chat open source?
I mean, oh man, how many? I must have made a lot of pivots. Built a lot of products that no one wanted.
Hmm.
Talked to a lot of customers and didn't necessarily solve any of their problems. And I think that's a hard lesson that every founder has to go through. Is like it's all about talking to customers and understanding what their needs are, and trying to come up with solutions that are for them, right? And it's not even necessarily about how you do it. It's about the solution itself, right? And customers don't care about how. They just care about solving that problem, whatever that pain is, whatever that need is. If you can meet that need, then that's everything, right? um, kind of walking through the mom test. That was brutal, but I think super necessary. The mom test, if if you're a listener and you're not familiar, go read the mom test. If you want to be a founder, the mom test is fantastic. Uh, I dare say it's got to be one of the best books out there for a new founder to read. It's essentially you treat your customer like your mom. Your mom loves you, doesn't necessarily want to hurt your feelings, and customers are like that. They're like, oh, this is great. When's the demo? When's the free
Mhm.
trial? And you as a first time founder, a lot of times I could, I used to take that as, wow, they really want to pay for this, right? And no, that's not the way to go. Someone says they're interested, you say how much. If they don't come back with a
Right, right,
number, they're not really interested, right? If they're not willing to take their credit card out and pay, or at least, hey, give me your credit card and I will charge it when it is done, right? Like that's when the
right.
rubber hits the road, you know, when the rubber meets the road. And I just, yeah, it's a hard lesson to learn. It's a really hard lesson to learn. So I pivoted a lot of times, and me and my co-founder Ryan's great. He he and I met years ago, became friends years ago. He moved in with me. We're roommates, and I think that foundation of trust and friendship is really the right way to start a startup. I think a lot of people kind of like meet and then oh yeah, it's like meeting someone and getting married on the second date or third date. It's like usually that's not
Right.
going to end well, right? But if you really know someone and you really trust someone, you're really friends, I mean that's something you can't fake, right? And that builds a foundation of trust for a startup. So as you're pivoting and things are going horribly wrong and then horribly right constantly every day, you've got a partner, right? Someone that you trust and can confide in.
I love that. Um,
So
and you said that, so when you pivoted, well, actually, what this is the question that I was going to ask. What do you think the number one issue most startup founders have when they're starting a business?
God, I mean, that is such a broad question, but I think the biggest one that
Customer
I
acquisition,
see,
right?
I mean, there's so many ways
And
to answer
product
that
market fit.
question, but I guess the way I'll choose
That's
to
true.
answer it, uh, when I did co-founder matching before me and Ryan, it was when Ryan still had a job and we weren't, partnered up, and I was looking for a new co-founder. I went through the YC co-founder matching program, and I'd meet all these founders, and it was so annoying. I got to the point where I'd hop on a call with a founder, they'd try to pitch me their idea, I'd stop them. I'd be like, whoa, 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 I don't want to hear about your idea. Like, I don't care about your idea. Customers don't care about your idea. Who do you have that you have talked to? What problem do you want to solve? I'm an engineer. I can make anything I want, but like, you know, my time is valuable. Like, I want
Right.
to know what is the pain point? How are we going to solve it? How are we going to distribute it? Right? Like those three things. If you don't have an answer for that, like I don't care about your idea. I really don't. I just want those three things, and we could figure the rest out later. And usually a founder would hop on the call, they'd be like, what? It's like such a
Right.
different way of thinking about things. No
Right.
one was
Right.
prepared. And I'd be like, all right, next, like, sorry, this isn't really gonna work out. Like I don't know how I can, and then some people they would kind of take it on a little bit, but you could tell they didn't really have product market fit, or they weren't necessarily solving a problem, or they didn't have a distribution strategy. And for those people, I'd kind of give them the feedback, and I'd be like, hey, I like this and I like that, but kind of have to work on this other thing, right? And yeah, it took a long, long time, but I mean, centralization of power in the AI industry is a huge problem. I mean, you have a few big players out there that are going to dominate, and there has to be a better way, right? And a lot of
Mhm.
companies want a better way out there, and there's clearly a need there that I found. There's a problem to be solved, and yeah, that's all we're doing. That's all we're doing as founders. We just solve problems, right? If you look at it in that lens, it's not about like anything else, right?
Right. Yeah. I love it. What is Chat Open Source for our listeners that want to know?
Yeah, we're an open source alternative to ChatGPT. We essentially are much more extensible than they are, and we fit more into whatever paradigm that enterprises need. So, I mean, for example, in the legal space, they have very specific needs. They can't just straight up use ChatGPT Enterprise. They have very strict privacy concerns and security concerns, and that's just one example of many enterprises that have um, these problems with using ChatGPT, problems with using Harvey AI, problems with using Lega AI. And this is just
But
one vertical of many. I mean, enterprise is so large and ChatGPT is so focused on consumer. They have their ChatGPT enterprise product, but it's a cloud only product. It basically is repackaging of their consumer product. This is
right,
insane, you know? This is
right.
insane. This is clearly, like they almost made it as an afterthought, right? Is what it feels like
Wow.
to me. And that's when I get on these calls with these customers, that's how they feel too. It's like,
Right.
oh man, I want to use
It's a
ChatGPT so bad. Everyone knows what that is, but yeah.
right. It's just amazing that I think in 1 month it gained like 100 million or like over 100 million users, which is I think one of the
Crazy.
fastest like growing, you know, platforms like that out ever.
Yeah.
But what do you think the future of AI is, and do you think it's going to be ultimately good or kind of a middle ground? I don't want to say bad because I don't.
Oh,
I
I'm an
think
AI optimist for sure.
okay,
I
yeah,
mean, aren't you? I hope
a
you
hundred
are.
percent.
I
I'm a
hope we
hundred
can
percent
all.
an AI optimist, but I know there's a lot of people. I know that you probably grew up with in Louisiana. I'm from Montana, and a lot of people are
Mm,
really against uh, technology, computers, robots taking over the world. They think Terminator is going to happen. And
yeah.
so I know you're an AI optimist, but what do you think the next 10 years are going to look like?
Mm,
And how is
mm.
AI going to impact that?
I mean, I think there's basically two scenarios, right? Um, One where broadly there is freedom and choice and the ability to use the models that you want to use and use them in the way that you want to use them, right? Um, where there's not this huge centralization of power in the AI industry, just an oligopoly, a few big players that are working with regulators. Um, I think that's a good world. I think that's a world where that's a better world, in my opinion, and I think it's a safer world. Ultimately, I think the alternative to that is regulatory capture, right? When a lot of doomers talk about AI, they're like, "Oh man, if we aren't careful, the world's going to end," right?
Right.
I think at the end of the day, a lot of these people are very smart. They understand that like a chatbot is not going to kill you, right? Or if
Right.
or if it does, it's like, you know, it, it's not the chatbot's not gonna, come out of the shadows and murder you. Like, I think we're years away from deploying these from robots and having like, and I think that will happen, but um, you know, it's like worrying about climate change on Mars before we've put a human on Mars. I think you're right.
Hmm.
It's like, hey, let's
Right.
let's maybe put the
I like
human
that
on Mars
analogy.
first, start building up the colony, then we can worry about climate change on Mars, right?
Right. Right.
And I think the other path that's regulatory capture is a world with only a few players, where there's a huge centralization of power, where they essentially try to kill the industry, right? I mean, I think you see this again and again and again when the startup becomes big enough to be the incumbent. They work with the ultimate corporation. I mean, the government is basically the ultimate corporation. They're like a corporation. I think Elon's quote is, "The government is a corporation in the limit, where they have they have a monopoly on violence, right?" They're the only corporation that can inflict violence on you, right? So if you work with these government regulators and you regulate the healthcare industry out of existence, right, to where no other startup can, can kill you, or if you regulate the AI industry and make it to where no other startup can kill you, or you know, uh, insert whatever industry, there's a pattern of this happening again and again in our history where um, you have these giant corporations that work with the regulators, and they are intent on making sure they pull up the ladder, right, so that no one else can climb up it. I think that's a really bad future for a lot of reasons. I think it kills innovation. It stifles all the AI progress that all the AI companies are saying that they believe in. And then I also think it's a dangerous world because if there's only a few big players out there and there's a centralization of power, then there's that could be a really bad world, right?
It seems like right now, I mean, Sam Altman with ChatGPT, and I know you probably have another meeting coming up, so we can kind of close this soon.
No,
but it seems like I know that Elon Musk was on a podcast the other day, and he was talking about his new AI platform and was comparing it with, I think it's called Gronk or something like that. He's comparing it with
Grok. Yeah.
Grok. He's comparing it with OpenAI, and how if you ask OpenAI to make a positive poem about Donald Trump, it's not gonna write anything up. But if you ask it to make a positive poem about Joe Biden, it'll write stuff up. With Elon Musk's AI system, it'll pretty much it'll spit anything out. Just
Yeah.
what do you think of that? Because it seems like you can kind of skew data and information depending on what the programmer programs in the AI. That makes sense.
I mean, I'll repeat what George Hotz said in a podcast interview. He said, when OpenAI talks about alignment and safety, and this is too dangerous for you to do X, Y, Z, they're not trying to align the model. So AI safety isn't about aligning the model; it's about aligning you, the user. I mean, think about this at scale, right? You have hundreds of millions, probably in the future billions of people, of consumers that are using ChatGPT. And, that alignment team becomes one of the most powerful social forces on planet Earth. Like, is this really the future you want to live in, where like a few people are making decisions for the planet that like affect everyone, right? Or do you want to live in a more decentralized type of situation where there's a lot more free thought and there's a lot more, there's different values being reflected. I don't think that necessarily you should have like, I don't know. I think this can go really dangerous really fast in both directions. I think that there does need to be some safety guards and some regulation. I'm not for just a free for all, but I mean, you can't kill the cradle or the baby in the cradle, right? You can't kill the baby in the crib, right? Like it's such early days, and we are just now starting to learn how these things are being deployed. So, I mean, I think that's kind of what our mission is about, right? That's why we started this.
Well, I'm really positive with what you guys are doing at ChatOpenSource. I'm really excited with AI in general. But Chase, I really enjoyed this conversation. Do you have any final closing thoughts?
I mean, I really appreciate you having me on the podcast. I know we've talked a few times. I feel like you know a lot about me, and I want to take you out for a coffee and kind of have a podcast in the reverse direction and
Let's do
interview
it.
you.
Let's do it.
Maybe we'll set
I'd
that
love
up next week. But yeah,
We
I
should.
mean, for the listeners, if you want to find out more, just reach out. I'm at chase@chatopensource.com if you want to help us build the future.
Perfect. And I'll put all of the information that you want to put, I'll put it in the link in the description. Other than that, Chase, really thank you for your time.